Hey, my name is Jason Williamson. I'm the Vice President of the Global Startup Ecosystem here at Oracle. Some of the biggest things that I've learned has come from starting companies. And interestingly enough, the lessons that I learned from doing my first startup wasn't in the experience of the startup. It was in some life experiences that were happening along the way. There's this natural tension. There's the ideal. That's what our business plans say. That's what our business professors teach us. That's what we read in the book. And then there's the real. And what life is it's a tension between the real and the ideal. And our job is to kind of try to make that tension get as close together as possible, but then recognize and embrace the fact that there's always going to be that tension there. It's always going to exist. So what do you do with that tension? And then invariably, struggle is going to happen. Life is going to happen. And so what do you do with that? In 2000, I was the co-founder of a software as a service application for the residential construction industry. So it was a CRM play. Very exciting to have an idea and create it and get some funding. But about the same time, or exactly at the same time, my wife and I had our first child. So there's two really big life events that were happening at the same time, both very exciting, like creation, right? When we first were kind of going through the pregnancy, we went through the normal excitement and joy that a new parent would have. Obviously, it was exhausting because I'm starting this company and having to figure out what it means to be a dad and what's the season of life going to bring. And in that process, we had some tough news. So we found out that my daughter, my unborn child, Anna, had something called spina bifida. Now, spina bifida is a neural tube birth defect that's permanently disabling. So before mom knows that she's pregnant, the neural tube forms. And if it doesn't form properly at the end, then kids will end up with spina bifida. So it's like a hole, right? Not like a hole, there's a hole in their back. And so they're often paralyzed. My daughter had a brain malformation where her brainstem and her cerebellum were stuck in the back of her neck, and we found out about an experimental surgery for kids who had spina bifida. And I'm a founder, I'm a builder, I'm a creator. My wife is the same way, and we have a bias for action. And so, we had this thought like, well, what can we do? We got to be able to do something. And we had heard about this story. And so what the experimental procedure was to take the unborn child out of the womb, which is like a very protected place, right? Deliver that child at 21 weeks gestation. So that's only 21 weeks after conception. That's a can of Coke, 12 ounces. And they would open the womb and take the amniotic fluid out and then do an open surgery on an unborn child where you can actually see through their skin and then put it all back. So just imagine, you're going through the struggles of starting a company, and I'm 20-nothing years old, having to face these major life decisions about an experimental surgery. One of the huge learnings that I had from that was that struggle, particularly struggle that comes to you not as a result of your behavior, right? Like that was the first time in my life and in my marriage that we had something hard happen to us that wasn't directly related to something one of us did, right? It just was. And so so we had to deal with a big unknown without a good why, right? And so what we learned is that really revealed our character. What kind of people are we? What kind of people do we want to be? So the first thing I want you to think about is that struggle and adversity is a revealer and a refiner of character. An amazing end to that story, or at least chapter 1 of that story. So we're still back in 2000. Anna's born, and it was just an incredible surgery. She came out of the womb, as they called her, very, very vigorous. So she is paralyzed below the knees today, but you would never know that. She's actually the point guard on the basketball team at her high school that I coach with her, and I've been able to come alongside her through all those years. So her story ends really, really well, and just so much learning from that. Now, being paralyzed below the knees just means her life is different. It doesn't mean it's easy. And that's another thing that we learned is like, hard things are good things. Sometimes you get hard so that you can learn how to do something better and find a different way to get something done. So if you can imagine a point guard that doesn't have use of their ankles and calves, that's really hard, but she just finds different ways to get things done. We went to Duke University to have Anna have a surgery to help correct some of her bone growth so that she could be straight and have an easier time to walk. And the first surgery on her right leg went great. The second surgery on her left leg failed. And what I mean by fail was that there was just a catastrophic injury to her ankle, where her ankle was just destroyed beyond repair. Nothing we could do. What that meant for her was a loss of everything that she loved, which was sports. Her passion is sports. And without the use of that leg, and there was no surgical repair, she was having to face amputation at age 15. And so that was tough, right? That was tough for her. It was tough for me and my wife to counsel her for that. We wanted to continue to persevere to find the answer that is right for her. So we went to doctors in Charlottesville and consulted doctors in Tennessee, and it culminated at Johns Hopkins, where we were with a doctor that did catastrophic war injuries. And imagine, I have 4 children, and we were all in the doctor's office together, listening to this diagnosis and this prognosis. And it wasn't great. It was hard because he was telling us the same thing: no mobility or amputation, and that was the result. But what was really interesting to see was the reaction from one of my boys. He's a few years behind Anna, and so he starts engaging with the doctor. And he said, okay, this is what I think we can do. We can build, and he proceeds to go through some engineering of her leg that he thinks this guy should be able to do. And if he can't, he'll help him. And so what was happening is that all these great ideas were coming out of this. Now, is a doctor going to listen to a 12-year-old and his crazy engineering? Absolutely not, at least in that case. But what it did was it sparked creativity, and it sparked a crazy idea. And I remember Safra Katz, our CEO, said one time, if people tell you your idea is crazy, you might just be onto something. Instead of running from struggle, instead of running from hard things and always looking for the easy path, I want you to be joyful when you have a trial. I know that sounds really strange, like, oh, this is great, hard things are happening to me. That's not what I mean. What I mean by that is, embrace the hard thing that's coming to you, because if you let it, it will produce perseverance, right? And perseverance, when you let it do its work, creates strength, and that's really when great things happen. If you think back at incredible stories of founders or people in your life that do great things, you never hear that it was an easy path. You always hear that it was hard. So be grateful, be happy when hard things come. Sometimes when I have these discussions with people, they say, yeah, Jason, I get that, but now what? How do I put something like that into practice? Like, I'm in the middle of a struggle now, or I just finished that out. What do I do with that? So what I want you to do is think about maybe 2 things. First is reflect. I want you to think about, and this is something to physically go do, think about a struggle that you're in now or one that just recently happened, and write about that. Write about that struggle. Because I will tell you, experience alone is not a teacher. Experience alone will teach us nothing. It's evaluated experience that teaches us. And for us to evaluate that, we need to pause and reflect. So I encourage you to reflect and write and think about your experience and write down and answer a few questions. How did it reveal your character? What did you learn about yourself? What is it teaching you? And most importantly, from that, what would you do differently, or what did you do well that you should do more of? That's the first step. The second step is, I want to encourage you to share that with someone. Tell someone what you wrote and what your goals are. And there's a reason why that I want you to do that, because you get 2 things for free. One, you get accountability. Because when you tell someone knows what you're thinking and what you want to do. And so now there's this connection of responsibility that you want to fulfill that. The second thing is you get an ally, right? And remember, if we do these things in community, that is the way that we're going to accomplish our goals. So I know we've talked about a lot of things, but I want to give you 2 big ideas to think about. Embrace struggle. It's through struggle that it's going to teach us the most. And that's where creativity comes from. That's where great ideas come from. The second big idea that I want you to take away is is be reflective on it, be a learner, and do it in community, because it's through community that we create the bonds to work together to get big things done.